Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru. Welcome to this episode of Yogananda podcast. We're on chapter 27, covering part 2 of the Autobiography of a Yogi. We're missing Lauren today, but we have the trio here ready to go. Chaps, Mike might be dropping off a bit earlier, but we have probably half an hour of his good self. So
quality time.
Exactly, yeah. Good. It's good enough for me. Where were we last episode, Priyank?
So last episode, it was the start of this chapter. Of course, Sri Yukteswar was planting the seed and slightly mocking and saying some things in jest to young Mukunda about organizational work. And he also then encouraged Mukunda essentially or Swami Yogananda to start Yogoda School, which then fruitioned into Ranchi School and then Ranchi Ashram as we know it now. We talked a lot about ideal education and Guruji's principles of kind of how to live. And we ended with comparing the four ashrams, the ancient Hindu phases of life, the four ashrams.
Nice. And in this part of the chapter 27, we're going to look a little bit more at the Yogoda Life Force that Guruji used in his teachings in his school, whose picture, if anybody can see the video of me, I've got the picture of the boys' school, 1935, next to me.
Oh, very sweet.
And we'll look at the success and responsibilities that come with organizational life and the wider family. There's a really nice part at the end that we'll cover where there's a moment between Yogananda and his dad, where there's a reconciliation from his dad with his life choice. So we'll jump into all that. So we'll kick off where we left off, talking about the school. This vision, educational vision that Yogananda had, we touched on it before. He organized the programs in a particular way, both at grammar school and high school grades. So we covered topics that wouldn't necessarily be seen in the modern day in the West. Agricultural, industrial, commercial, as well as academic subjects. Presumably, those would have been your language, your math, and so on. But certainly the agricultural was of importance to Yogananda, the industrial and commercial. Very practical subjects there. And when I read it, I think actually there's like chasms where the modern day educational system doesn't really touch on that for everybody, but they're extremely useful subjects to cover, which we'll talk about as to why in a moment. This was really based on, as Guruji says here, the educational ideals of the rishis. So he said that they had forest ashrams. They had been ancient seats of learning, so they were both secular and divine. This combination of secular teaching and divinity really is appealing to my mind. I don't know about you guys, if you wish you had been there or been able to go to one of these schools. Maybe we did in a previous life. But really it was for the youth of India. He arranged the classes to be outdoors. I thought it was a really nice insight there. Curious to hear what you guys think of the benefits to this. My thoughts really went to the connection with nature and how that would help orientate yourself in the world, where you actually want to try to ensure that it's not trampled on or root destroyed in our lack of wisdom. So you have that connectivity with nature to some degree, where you want to take care of it and nurture it and benefit from its plentiful sort of health benefits and things like that. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
That's a good way of looking at it. I was thinking of the literal, how they say you should have a well-grounded education. This is literally, you can imagine them being bare feet as well, as your picture kind of shows in the background, Chris. I love how you've positioned yourself with Paramahansa Yogananda just sitting on standing near your shoulder. It's fantastic. But so imagine studying on the ground, like sitting on the floor, with dirt, in contact with the dirt. If you're studying biology, you're literally touching and feeling the biology of insects and plant life and nature all around you, and the wind and the rain and the sun. So you can imagine that that would bring a lot more awareness and appreciation of some of the things that you're studying.
There's the Guru Kala tradition, Priyank. I think we touched on this before, right? That this is really what this is based on. Where do you want to jump in, Priyank, to take us away? You know a bit more about it.
So the reason I know a bit more is because I went to a place called the Sandipani ashram in Ujjain. It's a city in central India, and the Sandipani is Krishna's guru, and so Krishna went through this kind of education that's being described here. Krishna and his cousin Uddhava and Balarama. So they went through this education, and in the ashram, there's like 64 frames, hand drawn pictures, and each frame or picture shows 64 different subjects that they had to study. And Krishna, being Krishna, studied every single a different subject each day. So in 64 days, he graduated, and they're not simple subjects. Some of them are simple, but most of them are quite complex. For example, Geet Vidya is the first one, the art of singing. Then there's instruments, there's dancing, there's all sorts. There's juggling, there's making your bed. I'll put a link to it. The art of reciting books and mantras, so you can carpentry. It's phenomenal. Like it's such a varied education, and to think that they had this all those thousands of years ago is a phenomenal thing. So I'll put a link to it, and perhaps the Sandipani ashram as well. If anyone's in India, I'd encourage you to go there.
Juggling might seem trivial, but there's plenty of modern research now to show that your hand-eye coordination helps with brain health, right? So people who might play these sort of tennis or ping pong or something like that, you see benefits in these things. So yeah, awesome to hear. The experience in the more observational approach to education really is something that I think probably you couldn't really have in Northern Ireland because it's raining and so cold every day. So we'd have to have everybody well wrapped up. I could imagine in nice sunny India, it might make sense more, but definitely applying these to some of the colder climates in the world might be tougher for some folks. But certainly it would give that more character formation, you would think, and not be so detached and have more attunement with nature, as I mentioned. And maybe develop that spiritual intelligence, which would prove more efficient in life. Like
that was an interesting, like few subjects that you mentioned there, Priyank. I was wondering if we have any modern equivalent in schools these days where this is taught. Is this still an active school where you went in India, or is this more like a museum of ancient things?
It's a museum, but there are some traditions where you do some of this stuff, but I doubt it will be all of it, and I doubt the education will be 100% centered around those ancient subjects. But yeah, the subject. It's funny that you've both found those wasn't interesting. I just literally there were 64. I just scanned through a few. That cool.
Yeah, I feel like the subjects that have to do with art are also often the ones that when budgets get tight, then that's the first ones that get cut, right? And somehow the math and all of those biology, they seem to be more important in the eyes of people who make curriculums. I don't know if you guys have ever been to a Waldorf school, because I think they're one of the important pillars of their education system is that you have like quite a lot of art. Like they have a lot of dancing and music, and everyone has to play at least one instrument. And I feel like this is probably like seems to be the right direction, like having people be more balanced.
Duolingo music class is pretty good, by the way, especially if you're learning to read cosmic chants nicely.
I didn't know they did music.
They just,
Yeah.
I think they just started. It's pretty good, especially on the iPad.
Okay, good to know.
Well, on top of all this, Yogananda had the Ranchi students to be taught yoga meditation and a unique system of health and physical development, he says, Yogoda. And these principles, he said, he discovered in 1916. So what is this Yogoda?
I took Yogoda, obviously it's playing the next paragraph, but I took it to mean like the genesis of energization. And I found a reading from Swami Satyananda's book. And if you recall, Swami Satyananda was one of Guruji's close friends and disciples of Swami Sri Yukteswar. And he also wrote a book, a collection of full biographies of Kriya Yoga gurus, and Yogananda is one of them. And then he writes very beautifully about this kind of setting and Yogoda as well. Mike, do you want to read that out?
In the expansive and lovely wooded place in Ranchi, Swami Yogananda had created quite a happy environment with the students and teachers. The scenes of the Shanti Niketan came to mind. We also began to hold classes under trees. Some days Swamiji would be completely immersed in teaching class and go past the allotted time. He had to be alerted that the time for teaching another subject was being lessened. Here, he found the opportunity to employ a particular discipline of physical culture, and he created to help improve the physical conditioning of the students. This system, what was later known prestigiously as the Yogoda physical exercises. Kriya yogis benefited from practicing this system of exercise. About a year before the founding of the school, a book written by a German physical culturist named Miller came into Yoganandaji's hands. He was enthused and excited upon reading in the book about muscle building through mental power. Seeing me, he said, I have found exactly what I was looking for. This book had greatly helped in systemizing the Yogoda method. Swamiji had experienced that power could be gathered via the inexhaustible internal will of human beings, by which different muscles could be controlled and strengthened.
Nice. Yeah, we know modern day version is Yogananda goes on to explain that the Yogoda and Life Force, this is mind over matter stuff. Energization exercises, as Priyank you mentioned, is what jumps out at me here. So Yogananda clarifies that he realized that the body is like an electrical battery, and that could be recharged directly through the medulla oblongata, taking the energy from source into the human body through will, through the use of will. So we don't need to burden ourselves through this mechanical exercise, that we could simply consciously, instantly recharge life force into the body, and we would have an unlimited supply of cosmic energy. Now, that certainly sounds like a goal for me right now. Hopefully, I don't know about you guys, but if you stop doing your energization exercises and then go back to it, you realize the strength of them. Certainly, it gives you that extra power, right? That extra life force that you miss once you stop. This is Yogananda's explanation of what's happening. He goes on to talk about the Ranchi boys, that there's a pretty extraordinary result in this. But before we jump into that, Priyank, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, Guruji talks a lot about willpower, and then he uses the word volition quite a lot, and he describes the different levels of volition in the lessons. So I remember in the old lessons, it used to be in lesson 1, if I'm not mistaken, Mike. But now, and it's not a simple subject. Just you think willpower is just, it's quite intuitive. It feels like you can just employ your will and achieve what you want in small things, but Guruji takes it to the nth degree with energization and volition, and it's not a it's difficult to conceive, but sorry, easy to conceive, but very difficult to master, I think. So I think it's in lesson 20, the new lessons, that subject.
I also, when I hear that man's body is like an electrical battery, I always think of Star Wars, where they have like electricity coming out of the hands and things like this. Just wonder if these
the force,
the force, exactly. But certainly Guruji well ahead of his time on scientific understanding of, you know, the light that passes from cells and so on, like so on and so forth. This electricity that runs in the body. Yogananda was already talking in those terms over 100 years ago. Shall we read out a quote from Yogananda on will? We can't really pass through this subject without pulling this apart a little bit more. Priyank, do you want to kick us off?
Whatever your position in life, it is you who put yourself there. The human will, when led by ignorance, causes nothing but confusion and trouble. But if it is tuned in with wisdom, it is guided by divine will.
Constantly carrying a thought with dynamic willpower will strengthen that thought until it becomes an outward force. When your willpower is developed to that extent, you can control your destiny.
Always be sure what you want is right for you to have. Then use all the forces of your willpower to attain your objective, continually keeping your mind on God. Your efforts will then be crowned with success.
And so did the boys at Ranchi school employ this will. They had some extraordinary ability. Yogananda goes on to say here that they shift the life force from one part of the body to another, and they could sit in perfect poise in difficult asanas. And it goes on to say that they performed feats of strength and endurance that many powerful adults could not equal. Not just any adults, but powerful adults. So this is quite a statement to come from Yogananda here, to say what these boys were able to achieve and master using these techniques.
I wonder which asanas he's referring to. There's some exceptionally difficult ones. There's a really good picture of Guruji. I think it's probably at Encinitas, and there's three of his student disciples. They're kind of doing like this. It's like a calisthenics. It's like a hold with just the palms of your hands, your whole body up. It's, you know, I'll put a picture. Maybe I'll make that the cover image. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, and Yogananda mentions one of these students was his own brother, Vishnu Shaling Ghosh. So he joined the school and later became a noted physical culturist. I took this simply to mean more of a bodybuilding type individual. We talked about Vishnu, not in this series that we're doing when we talk about the autobiography of a yogi, but we covered it when we looked at Awaken, the documentary. So there's quite a bit on Vishnu. He was pretty active guy, went on to achieve quite a bit in his life. Yogananda says that he was one of the students that traveled in 1938 to 39 to the West. So went to California in particular. And they gave exhibitions of strength and muscular control. And there's content in the Awaken film that's pretty cool. So go check it out if you haven't seen it. Yeah, Mike, he was a pretty interesting character. Went on to achieve quite a few things.
Yeah, apparently he made quite a name for himself. There was a yoga competition in LA named after him, and there were quite a few things where his name was dropped. Apparently, he was involved in founding Bikram Yoga, and he was teaching yoga all over the world. He had a teaching tour in Japan, and also he was teaching at Columbia University in New York. He lived quite a long life, so he died died in 1970. So he was quite a man of the world and pushed the message of yoga in his way.
Yeah, and it's interesting comparison that he actually developed the life force control and the Yogoda that he was taught to an outward form, whereas Yogananda very much took it inward. But he had great success. And this was before the time of, a lot of the bodybuilding that we know now to be.
Yeah. I wish there was a picture with him and Arnold, but I couldn't find one.
Yeah. Arnold took it to another bulky level, didn't he? But I think I've seen Vishnu. He's certainly not as bulky, but he had extreme levels of strength and ability, right? So pretty curious, pretty interesting guy. He passed away. There's a footnote here in July 9th, 1970 in Calcutta. So we know he returned to his homeland. So looking really into the success of this organization of Ranchi. We touched on this last episode, but the numbers here that were given is that the applications for the school, whilst there was only 100 students that were possible at one time to be taught, there were 2,000 applications. So the sheer demand and popularity of this school really would have been incredibly impressive at the time. So there must have been really, strong magnetism from Guruji to pull in such demand. But yeah, great to see really that it was by instruction for day students that was added later on, probably in response to this demand. So the role that Yogananda had to play, he says here, was father, mother to the little children. So there were quite a few of them. He had to do that and cope with his many organizational difficulties, he goes on to say. So something that you can just imagine, you've got a throng of students kind of chasing after every word and, probably pulling at his clothes, asking for help. And Yogananda having to sit and do all the sort of organizational administrative duties in the background as well. I thought to myself, this probably acted as the seed for his leadership in later times in the United States and bolstered the strength of service. We're going to jump into that, actually, that aspect now as to really what Yogananda would have learned from this. And it seems to be a pretty critical moment in his life. We have some of Christ's words and Sri Yukteswar's interpretation of these words to help us understand really what Yogananda was going through at the time. And so there's a quote here from Christ. If Mike, you would be kind enough to read.
There's no man that hath left house, or brethren, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands, for my sake, and the gospel's, but he shall receive 100-fold now in this time, houses, and brethren, and sisters, and mothers, and children, and lands, with persecutions, and in the world to come eternal life.
Awesome. Sri Yukteswar broke this down for us. We don't have to do it, guys, so no pressure. Sri Yukteswar's handled it for us. Priyank, what did he say?
He said, the devotee who forgoes the usual life experiences of marriage and family rearing in order to assume greater responsibilities, those for society in general, in quotes, and 100-fold now in this time, houses and brethren, unquote, performs the work that is often accompanied by persecution from a misunderstanding world. But such large identifications help the devotee to overcome selfishness and bring him divine reward. Yeah, so true, isn't it? Like our sacrifices that we make for the spiritual life or embedding a spiritual life in our life seem large initially, but when viewed from the macro or cosmic lens, they're minuscule, they're insignificant, and especially when you compare them to the blessings and the grace that's received from making those sacrifices. Like the simplest one that you get probably from minute one of taking it seriously is that you start becoming really content with things, from small things to larger and larger things, and then you stop running around seeking entertainment or fulfillment in external, which is such a easy to say thing that everyone would aspire to, but it just comes through grace by registering for the lessons and imbibing Guruji's words, for example.
Yeah, and what they're saying here is, you've just kind of touched on it there a little bit in terms of you can grasp it, but mastering this is and a whole other story. Yogananda talks about, love thyself and, thy neighbors, and Christ did as well. But actually putting that into practice is something that I suppose we're all here to do, right? This is pretty pivotal to everybody's understanding in the world, how to love others and be of service to others. And there's such a beautiful point on this subject that I'm not going to touch on, because Yogananda's dad actually teaches us that, and we'll talk about that in this episode later on. But for now, there's the subject of service. There's a couple quotes that's going to say this better than, certainly better than I would be able to say it, that Yogananda tells us what is the purpose of service and why we should do it. So Mike, kick us off with the first one, please.
Yeah, this first sentence I've heard so many times from monks at SRF and in Guruji's writings. Like, life should be chiefly service. Without that ideal, the intelligence that God has given you is not reaching out towards its goal. When in service you forget the little self, you will feel the big self of spirit.
To continue.
And the second one.
Okay. To continue to, there's a separate quote, sorry. To continue to read, sorry. Your entire motive must be service. The main purpose of any business should be service. It should not be merely money making. The store that gives the best service and handles the best products is the one we like. True.
Applying this is something that I've been thinking about recently, what I'm doing at the Eco Village and so on and so forth. I wonder, can everybody do that? How can you apply this to your life? Because sometimes I think, am I guilty of this merely money-making element of life? And am I really mindful about service to the degree to which Yogananda is telling us we should be? So this is all nicely given to us here by Yogananda. There's the reading from Christ was in Mark 10:29-30 for anyone who wants to jump into that again.
And also in Second Coming of Christ, Discourse 63 as well, for a fuller description of this.
Yeah, we were debating before we jumped on the call, should we go into that? More fuller version of it, but Sri Kishwar sort of summarized it very succinctly for us. So
true.
Yeah, there's additional reading there for anyone who wants to look at that. And so we'll cap it off this episode with a part on the wider family. That there's a moment here, beautiful moment, and it feels like maybe a long time coming for us, because we've been going through this autobiography line by line for how long now? 27 chapters long at least, and we have often touched on the relationship between Yogananda and his father, and how his father was nudging, encouraging him to go one way with his life, down a path of working in the real way system. Yogananda stated quite clearly he wanted to be a monk many times, and there was this kind of ongoing friction, right, in the family. But we can put that to an end now. I think this is the time to turn that page. Yogananda says that one day his dad arrived to bestow a paternal blessing, this long-held blessing that he says, really because interesting insight that Yogananda says that he hurt his dad by refusing this offer of a position, being that his dad was high up in the railway service, that he refused the position with the Bengal Nagpur Railway. So I suppose that's a natural thing for a father to feel, this sort of rejection by the son that didn't want to follow in his footsteps. Mike, you want to jump in?
I'm sure it was also a thorn in Yogananda's life that he now pulled out, and this must have felt good for, I guess it felt good for Bhagavati, but it also felt great for Yogananda that his dad is now proud of him, of his choices and what he's doing, and he kind of feels that he has come to get this wholesome career that he was trying to get him to a different career that might not have actually fit so well. So he actually seeing the light now. It's at least for the moment. I don't think he will agree once he goes to America, but right now he's happy.
I think he hurt him also because nepotism was strong back then, as it is now in Indian politics, for example. But back then he probably would have like had a succession plan. Ananta was there, Mukunda will do this, and they'll all come up this line to either
We'll take
where
over
I,
the company.
yeah,
Yeah.
either where I am, or better still, above me, you know. And I think like, that probably exists more in the US than other parts of the world as well in terms of big companies and politics, especially family-made companies. That happens a lot in the UK as well, like with companies, smaller, medium-sized companies that I'm auditing. It's always father and son, and
yeah.
Strong family values.
Yeah.
Yep. Birds of a feather flock together. Chamak. The quote here was that Guruji's dad says, "Son, I am now reconciled to your choice in life, but it gives me great joy to see you amidst these happy, eager youngsters. You belong here rather than with the lifeless figures of railway timetables." It's a funny quote, isn't it?
I can 100% relate being in that industry.
Yeah. No, it shows that he has a sense of humor, right? And he's balancing the emotional weight of what they would have went through over the past 20 years or so, with this bit of humor. So it shows great character. And I thought initially when I read this, I'm now reconciled. I thought that was more of a negative touch initially, so I was pleasantly surprised when the next line says, "It gives me great joy to see you amidst these happy, eager youngsters." And so he waved toward the group of a dozen little ones tagging at my heels, Yogananda says. His dad goes on to comment that he only had 8 children, which is a lot anyway, right? Having 8 kids. But I only had 8 children, he observed with twinkling eyes, but I can feel for you. Curious last sentence. It actually made me pause to think, what does he mean by "I can feel for you"?
I think the word twinkling there is a good key, because if we note every time the word twinkling is used in Autobiography, something bit of magic is happening behind those simple words. So in this respect, he's saying, I had only 8 children. And then he says, with eyes twinkling, I can feel for you, because Guruji's taken the responsibility for how many hundreds, if not millions of thousands of millions of devotees. So his family is very big, and his responsibility for us extends far beyond this lifetime. So I feel like Mukunda's father, Swami Yogananda's father, knew the weight of those kind of words.
Yeah. And I guess going a level deeper into it as well, Guruji's teachings, he says essentially we should feel the need of others. We should, live and be empathetic towards the needs of others, which is a really beautiful way of living. Often very burdensome emotionally and so on, but this is how the great gurus teach us to be. There's a great quote that we're going to end this podcast with.
Can I tell a story from Swami Satyananda's
go
book?
for it, Frank. Yeah.
Yeah, so with this respect, in terms of how Guruji is taking care of so many children, there's a really nice story from Swami Satyananda's book, and it goes like this. It says, the unstoppable zeal of an event on a certain day still vividly comes to my mind, he's saying, of being with Swami Yogananda. It was decided that the students and teachers together, about 60 people, would spend the night in a solitary mountain near the Jagannath temple, about 7 miles away from the ashram, and that we would also cook outdoors and eat there. A little before evening, we arrived at the mountain with our things. Just a little while later, a huge storm of rain and wind started up. Who will go where? Where will we keep the things? Where or even when will we be able to cook? We were besides ourselves with these concerns. The rain would not stop. We decided that we would just eat whatever snack food we had and somehow gather in 2 or 3 caves and spend somehow the night. Yogananda ji said, that will not do. We cannot admit defeat. Come on, everyone, get up and let's go to that village in the distance and get some dry wood. We will cook right in this cave. We have to get water too. Look, see that pond there in the distance? It was raining intensely at the time. A few students got up, took off their garments and dressed in their langotis, which is typical underwear for males, ran towards the village. I also got excited and ran, getting soaked in the rain. The head of the village knew us. He was dumbfounded upon seeing us like that in the night, and asked everyone to stay in their house. But after hearing our plans, he hurriedly gave us dry wood and some other things. Taking all of those things on our heads, we ran in the darkness, and identifying shadows from a distance, we arrived at our gathering place. The rain subsided a little. Water was brought from the pond. The cooking was done in a small cave. The taste of warm khichdi, which is rice and lentils and vegetables, which most Indians will know, and we ate on leaves spread out in a long cave, still feels like nectar, even in memory. Yogananda used to say, no showing sour faces. Thinking that there is danger will not do. We too would become energized by his words of gusto. I am not ashamed to say that I would feel grumpy some days. In any case, the happy memories of those exciting and enlivening times still bring up the zestful fervor of youth.
Awesome.
It's got great times they would have had, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I spent 10 days in an ashram fairly recently, and just from being around like-minded people and being in that environment in general is so beneficial for the soul and everything. So yeah, good memories. And the eating on a leaf spread out in the long caves, eating with your hands and everything, and you would have been really in touch with nature and everything around you there. So yeah, beautiful story. Thanks, Priyank. What do we have to look forward to in the next episode before we close with this final reading from Guruji?
Next week, there's a wonderful story about the students and a little deer, which Guruji also comes to love and get quite attached to. We talk about death because the deer doesn't make it in their care. So Guruji uses this opportunity to talk about that and our connections with people that pass. We talk more about the Ranchi school, its organization, its expansion and how the present day ashram is today, because there's a picture of the ashram in this chapter. And we have a revisitation from Swami Paramahansa, who comes to visit the school, and all of that will be bolstered by more of Swami Satyananda's stories, because he was one of the principals at the time.
Awesome. Looking forward to that, and with full quartet, right?
Hopefully.
Back next week. So thanks, Priyank, for today, and thank you everybody for tuning in. And with that, we'll close this episode with a reading from Paramahansa Yogananda on the shining light of service to others. The way to freedom is through service to others. The way to happiness is through meditation and being in tune with God. Let your heart beat with the love for others. Let your mind feel the needs of others, and let your intuition feel the thoughts of others. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.